Juuse Saros and Kevin Lankinen. What are their season superlatives?
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off this episode with a hey, how y'all doing to our Locked On Pred heads. Those are our everyday listeners who tune in each and every weekday to talk Nashville Predators hockey with us. We appreciate your support, and we love that we get to spend just a little bit of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I am the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News. And is it just me, or did I sound really Southern when I said I'm Emma?
I kicked it off with that, hey.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all. So this is welcome to the Wednesday Southern episode of Locked On Predators, y'all. We are going to dive into and actually wrap up our season superlatives on today's show. And we're wrapping it up with a bang. We are going to be talking about the goaltenders. We did talk briefly about Yaroslav Askarov. So today's episode is focused on Juuse Saros and Kevin Lankinen in their 2023-2024 seasons. But before we dive into the deets, I want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. All right, Emma, we are wrapping up. I cannot believe that we have gotten through all of our player season superlatives. And we have had some superlatives, y'all. We have gotten some creative ones out there.
We've had from secret agent Mr. Potato Head to sweet Bridgerton Chihuahua. I mean, I think we've really just kind of run the gamut here at Locked On Predators.
If you are looking for the most accurate summary of a player's season, this is where you come for that Bridgerton Chihuahua analysis.
Yes.
Interesting season in net for the Nashville Predators. Maybe a little bit unpredictable when we're talking about Juuse Saros' season and sort of where expectations were set for him with the Predators in this reset, Emma. But before we get into that whole conversation, why don't you kick us off and award him his season superlative?
I'm going to have to go with most likely to be, the guy that will most likely you will be reminded of how small he is every time the Predators are on national television. Because every time it's like, it would be a good, Juuse Saros would make a good drinking game whenever the Predators are on a national broadcast. Whoever the analysts are always feel the need to mention like 3, 4, 5, 6 times about how small he is. He is under 6 feet tall. He's 5'11", I think. 5'10", 5'11". I don't know what he's listed as.
He's listed as 5'11".
5'11". So, I mean, yeah, he's undersized, but it's okay. He doesn't need to be big. When you're that explosive, you don't need to be big. So,
yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's so funny you say that. I've thought that so many times, except it would be the best and worst drinking game. A, because it would be very action-packed, but B, you would not remember anything after the second period because they really do. And it's remarkable to me how much they harp on Juuse Saros' size. Like, okay, I get it if you want to mention it once, but it's something that consistently they bring up. And I think his size is actually the least interesting part of Juuse Saros as a professional NHL goaltender. That's the least interesting thing to talk about when it comes to his game and his performance in net. That's a big pet peeve of mine.
Yeah. So I hope then that I didn't steal your superlative.
Oh, I'm afraid you did not. I was kind of hoping you would.
And I think I know where you're going with this.
Superlative for Juuse Saros is most likely to wish he had never mentioned his double cup.
That was such a good one. We talked
Yes.
about this. We
Yeah.
talked about this before we recorded, and I was like, that's so good. I can't steal that from you.
I would have been fine with it. But I will just say, as a boy mom, I feel very comfortable saying that Juuse Saros made a comment. He took a hard, I think it was a shot, to the regions. And he just made an offhand comment. Juuse Saros, just kind of being funny to a friend of ours, Alex Doherty, who works now for the Tennessean. And he made a comment, just kind of offhand, little quiet Juuse Saros comment. It's a good thing I was wearing a double cup. Well, my friends, Pandora's double cup box has been opened. And look, I'm a boy mom. I'm not uncomfortable talking about these things. I was like, what is this? And so it just led to a ton of research. And in case somebody missed that episode where my former co-host Nick was a little bit mortified, I shared that there are actually goaltenders who triple cup. and why? Yeah.
I think it's great. We got to give a shout out to Alex. We love you. He did the research, and it kind of became the running joke that this is what's going to win him his Pulitzer Prize is
That's
his
right.
reporting on the double cup.
The double cup.
I always I wanted to sit in on those conversations, but I knew that me, a female, being there, I'm like you, I don't care. I work in sports. I don't care.
Right.
But I knew, because of who Juuse is, I knew that if I was there, my presence there would make him clam up, and he probably would not want to talk about his double cup. So I was like, all right, I'll just wait for Alex to tell me what he said.
There was a lot of other things to talk about when it comes to Juuse Saros's season. And maybe the double cup was a nice diversion, because he was a pretty big topic of conversation from first puck drop until the last game of the season. And it's interesting where that conversation went. Of course, with the Predators in a reset, I think the expectation for everyone was, best case scenario, the Nashville Predators could sneak in potentially to the playoffs on the back of Juuse Saros. Now, the Predators did make the playoffs, but I'm not sure you would necessarily say they got into the postseason based solely on the performance of Saros. He had a rougher start than we're used to.
While the rest of the team in front of him had to adjust so much to Andrew Burnett's system, while that shouldn't necessarily directly impact the goalie, I think that it does indirectly impact the goalie, because it changes the way that he sees the game as well. And so it took him a little while. And it's just funny to me that I feel like Predators fans just don't appreciate what they have, because they're like, oh, Juuse Saros is having a terrible season. Okay, maybe by his standards, sure.
Right.
However, we should be appreciating the fact that, hey, we don't need our goalie to bail us out every single game this year, because that's the thing. He's become so valuable to this team because in the past he has been their most valuable player. I mean, last year he certainly was. And then this year, he wasn't stealing as many games for them, and he wasn't, kind of single-handedly dragging them, into the playoffs. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. It means that you actually have some offense now. Now you need more. But right. I think that just because he is not the superstar guy carrying the team, just because he doesn't have to be, that doesn't mean that he's suddenly, oh, he's a bad goalie now. Come on.
Right.
No, come on.
Well, and I think it's a little bit of almost a paradigm shift in some ways when you are watching the Nashville Predators, because for so long, there were definitely seasons and postseasons where you needed Pecorine to kind of carry the team to get to the postseason. I think that we saw last season, literally everybody and their brother at the end of the 2022-23 season. I mean, they were dropping like flies, and who did you have standing at the end? A couple of veterans, a lot of young players, and Juuse Saros, and they almost made it into the postseason. And so I think the mental shift was, hey, Juuse Saros is going to be the guy that carries the Predators through this reset. And even though, like you said, this wasn't his best season, this was actually, statistically speaking, his worst season since the 2015-2016 season where he played one game. This is still not a bad goaltending performance. He finished the season with a .906 save percentage, y'all. There are so many teams that would love to have this quote unquote bad season that Juuse Saros had for the Nashville Predators. And I agree with you. Things are going to look different, especially with Andrew Brunette's system and what Barry Trotz is trying to build here. They are trying to build a team that is based on offense. It is not a team that is limiting offense and counting on goaltending as much. So I think it's going to look different in net. The expectations of Juuse Saros are going to be a little bit different in net moving forward.
Yeah, and that's not, like you said, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think, a bad quote unquote UC Saros is a really good, really good anyone else. I think one thing that, especially with UC, is that, and I don't know, there's no way to know or to prove like the exact impact that this has had on him, but like, if you look over the last 4 seasons, he has the most starts of any goalie in the NHL other than Connor Hellebuck. And there is no reason the Predators need to be using him this much. Like, if you really want him to be your starter in net, for the foreseeable future, you need to start giving your backup, whether it's Kevin Lankinen or Yaroslav Askarov or whoever it is next year, you got to start giving them, more starts, because that I think you're playing with fire when you're overusing him. You risk him getting hurt. You risk him seeing, a decline in performance. And so again, I'm not saying that his performance this year is entirely to blame on him being overused, but I would imagine that it's got to be part of it, because if you look at Kevin Lankinen was the backup and he only started 17 games this season. That is not enough. It's not, especially for a goalie of Kevin Lankinen's caliber. And I know we'll get to him in a second, but I think that that's my biggest beef with the Predators management of Juuse Saros, is that they gotta, if you want to extend his lifespan, in net, you got to use him a little bit less.
Tons of rumors. We've talked about Saros's performance. There were tons of rumors at the trade deadline, whether Saros would stay or Saros would go. Obviously, ultimately, Barry Trotz kept him here. It will be, I believe it's July 1st, whether they can re-sign Saros yet or not. So we're going to see what happens in the offseason in net. But part of that equation is, like you just talked about, Kevin Lankinen. And coming up, we're going to look at Kevin Lankinen's games. Again, only 17 starts, but we're going to take a look at his season and award season superlatives for Kevin Lankinen. Today's episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. If you are looking for a last-minute event, something to do in the evening here around Nashville, or if you are traveling somewhere this summer and you're looking for something fun to do wherever you are, you need to download the Game Time app. Game Time makes getting tickets to your favorite events faster and easier. They have great deals on everything from sports to comedy to theater to concerts. You can find it all on the Game Time app. Game Time has great last-minute deals where the price may actually go down the closer you are to your event starting. So if you're a last-minute planner, Game Time is going to be your best friend. You can also get views from your seats, so you know exactly what you're paying for. And they show you their all-in price. You have no surprises at checkout. Game Time also offers their lowest price guarantee. If you find a seat in the same row and section for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. And it's easy. A few clicks and your tickets are downloaded to your phone. No need to sort through all of your email to figure out where they are. You are ready to go with Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Emma, we are working through goaltending superlatives for wrapping up these season superlatives. And we talked about Juuse Saros. We talked about his double cup. We are now going to talk about the other goaltender that we didn't see as much of. And that was Kevin Lankinen, the backup goaltender for the Nashville Predators. Kevin Lankinen finished this season with 17 starts, 11 wins, 6 losses. He had a .908 save percentage. If you were awarding his season superlative, what would you give to Kevin Lankinen?
Well, we've already talked about how he is most likely to be a life coach or should be a life coach or a therapist or something. So to maybe diversify from that a little bit, I would have to go with either the backup who is least likely to remain a backup in his career, or he is like the ultimate to me as someone who, and I will be the first to admit, I am not a patient person. And that, comes back to bite me quite a bit in my life. But to me, Kevin Lankinen is the ultimate Zen master. Like, I feel like if I was him, I found myself getting riled up on his behalf throughout this year of being like, why, like he needs to start. He wants to start. You got to start him more. You got not only because of, Juuse Saros and you got to rest him and make sure you're not overusing him, but also you need to, it's just so hard for him. And like, again, like you said it about Juuse Saros, but I think in general that any goalie will tell you they want to start more. Like they're never going to say, no, I'd rather sit this one out. Like they always want to be playing. And so, especially for a guy like Kevin Lankinen, who's made it known he has higher aspirations. He doesn't want to be a backup. And I think he's earned a shot at being a starter somewhere. Knowing, of course, he's not going to be a starter in Nashville. But I think that the Predators were so lucky. And I think Philip Forsberg was the one who said it. I forget which game it was, but it was a game that Lankinen had started and won. And, he started all these games on the road against playoff teams, like these horrible, like odds stacked against him kind of situations. And he really held his own. And I think that Philip Forsberg was the one who said it because someone asked him after the game, like, what do you think of your backup in goal tonight? And he's like, well, he's not a backup. I can tell you that.
Right.
And I'm sure Kevin Lankinen's agent was like, yes, when he heard that, because that just really, yes. And so I think that, but again, he just remained so calm and so just Zen. He's a Zen master, like throughout the entire season. And that inside he's probably got this fire that like, oh, I want to be starting more games. I want to be doing all this. But he was just so cool, calm, collected.
Yes.
Even when you asked him about it, I really do think, we've said life coach, but I think he will make a great coach one day, maybe a goalie coach or something, because he is so self-aware. He's very introspective. And heck, when, normally I feel like the players who make the best coaches were not, for the most part, not usually the star players. They were the guys who sat on the bench a lot because they get a unique perspective of the game because they watched and observed so much. And I feel like that combined with his, his hockey sense and his just general knowledge and awareness, I think Kevin Lankinen will make a great coach one day.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I, we aren't going to belabor the point, but I would 100% pay him to help me get my stuff in order because Kevin Lankinen is, and he has to be, especially right now in this situation that he is in, he has to really keep a wise perspective and a long-term perspective, because he isn't going to be the starter with Juuse Saros in Nashville. But my superlative has to do with how he does that. And for me, I would award him most likely to make the best use of his time. Because when you only get 17 starts as a backup goaltender, game starts matter. It matters when you are in games. And I think you have a valid point. Kevin Lankinen got some hard road starts. I mean, he started on the road against Florida, Vegas, Dallas, Edmonton, Vancouver, Carolina. Like, this is the guy that you put in the most hostile territory against strong offensive teams, and you don't feel like, ugh, I just kind of threw our back up out there. Woo, back up out there, and we're just going to buckle up and see what happens. I mean, they have a lot of confidence in him, but he will tell you that he gets better by making practices his games. And when he goes into a practice, he's not wasting time. He's not letting pucks in. He's not taking, shifts off as they're doing drills. He doesn't take drills off. And I really think that is a credit to the mental game that he has had to play as the backup goaltender in Nashville. And I'm with you. I'm curious to see what happens in net for Nashville in general, but I'm very curious to watch Kevin Lankinen's potential, starting opportunities as they come, whether they come this next season, he's a UFA again, or kind of what happens with him. Because I agree with you. This is a guy who deserves a chance to battle for a starting job somewhere.
He is a really good goaltender, and I feel like he kind of got the short end of the stick. The last time he had an opportunity to be a starter in the NHL was in Chicago, where he was not set up for success for a variety of reasons, but a large part of that had to do with the team that was in front of him, which is why I am intrigued by what he does this offseason, because I know the Predators would love to bring him back, if they can at the right number. But I also know, as we've said, he wants to be a starter. But now, knowing the experience that he had in Chicago, is he going to view it as more beneficial to re-sign in Nashville and knowing that he's going to be a backup? Or, maybe he can get a starting opportunity somewhere, but if it's a team like San Jose or maybe a team that is not going to be competitive, and no disrespect to San Jose, it's just where they are in their organizational timeline right now. But to me, I would think that knowing the experience that he had in Chicago, that Lankinen would probably rather stay as a backup on a competitive team like the Predators. Now, if you're Nashville, if you sign him to another 1-year deal, I would say, again, this is my own feeling, but I also feel like maybe to sweeten the pot for him a little bit, to say like, hey, you should come back. You promise him more starts, which I think is going to be beneficial not only to him, but to Juuse Saros and to the team as a whole. I think it's going to be good. And that way, if you need him, he becomes a very valuable trade chip at the trade deadline. And at that point, you could trade him somewhere where he could either have a starting role or compete for a starting role. That's when, because there have been questions, and we talked about this earlier on the show, that, there have been questions about Yaroslav Askarov and is he ready? And what are you going to do with him? So you want him, because you mentioned consistency is key. So you want Askarov to maybe stay in Milwaukee rather than bring him up as the backup right out of the gate next season, because he's just going to be sitting on the bench a lot.
Yep.
And so it's going to be more valuable for him to keep getting the reps. I think he's proven everything he needs to in the AHL, but I think that you'd rather have him keep getting the reps. You keep Lankinen as your backup, and then if you need to, you trade Lankinen at the deadline. That's when you bring Askarov up. To me, that makes the most sense for this organization. But all of that hinges I don't know if this is the correct use of your phrase, Anne, but the hitch in the giddy up for me.
Let's go.
Is that you need to give him some more starts.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to dive into that, what comes next in net for Juuse Saros, Kevin Lankinen, perhaps Yaroslav Askarov. Today's episode is brought to you by Policy Genius. A lot of life is unpredictable, but a good life insurance plan gives your family a financial safety net to protect against some of those unknowns. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 a year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius helps you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Policy Genius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who found the best fit for their needs. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. All right, Emma, you touched on right there a path forward for the Nashville Predators in goal. I think it's pretty genius, quite frankly. I'm not sure.
I jumped the gun. I know
No.
we were, I got too excited.
Well, and here's the thing. I'm right here with you. I will say I think many people in Nashville will disagree with your take, but
They frequently do. They
Well,
frequently do. That's okay.
Welcome to the party, y'all. Here for everybody. Most everybody.
Yep.
I'm here for this take for a couple of reasons. If you sign Juuse Saros to a longer term contract, A, I believe you could get something relatively team friendly. B, I think no matter what you see in Yaroslav Askarov, and he is a wildly talented young goaltender, he is a young, inexperienced goaltender. And every team that has Juuse Saros on the roster is a better hockey team. You are a better hockey team with Juuse Saros in net. I also I'm with you with Kevin Lankinen. I think the choice for Kevin Lankinen is going to be interesting. Does he want that starting job? Does he want one more year of growth in the Nashville Predators goaltending system with some more starts? Does that give Yaroslav Askarov another another chunk of a season to develop in Milwaukee? I like that idea. Remember, Yaroslav Askarov did not finish in net for the Milwaukee Admirals. He had an injury that he was dealing with. Now, he was back to backing them up at the very end of their season, their postseason, but also wasn't the starter at times in some of the early series in the postseason as well. So there's opportunity for growth. Also, can we just say Yaroslav Askarov is 21 years old? Y'all, he just got old enough to have a Miller Lite. Can we just remember he's just a young sprout? So I like this plan that you've laid out, that you have fleshed out. I know a lot of people feel like you've got to trade Juuse Saros this season. I disagree. Just because somebody is your most valuable trade piece doesn't mean your team is better with them traded. Again, we'll see with Lankinen and we'll see with Askarov. But word did kind of just sort of sift out to Elliot Friedman over the weekend. Emma, what was Elliot Friedman talking about when it comes to Nashville Predators and goaltending? What did you hear?
Well, there were a couple things. Well, actually, I think the first thing that we heard was last week when Elliot Friedman said on 102.5 The Game that he expects that, or he believes that Juuse Saros' agent is waiting for Igor Shesterkin from the Rangers to sign his new deal before the Predators work on signing a deal for Saros. And I think that that's a big part of like setting the market, because I think that both of those guys have 1 year remaining on their contract. I mean, currently Shesterkin is making, I think, like $600 something thousand more than Saros is per year. I mean, it's more, it's not a massive amount, but
Right.
he's making more. And they're both, they both got a year left. Shesterkin has a Vezina trophy under his belt, and Saros does not. Shesterkin has also made much deeper playoff runs than Saros has, and that's not necessarily Saros' fault. It just means that we've seen more of Igor Shesterkin than we have of Juuse Saros in the playoffs. And so as a result, Shesterkin has, better numbers in the postseason, even if Saros has better numbers in the regular season.
Right.
So I think the Vezina trophy especially is going to go a long way in those contract discussions. So at first people, they hear this about Saros waiting for Shesterkin to sign a deal before they sign one of their own. It's like, come on, these two goalies are not the same caliber. One has a Vezina, one doesn't. Like, this is not smart of Saros's agent, blah, blah, blah. And people kind of started to freak out about that. But then over the weekend, as you mentioned in his 32 Thoughts podcast, Elliot Friedman pretty much laid down the law and said, y'all, Juuse Saros is not getting traded. He wants to stay. The Predators want him to stay. They're confident that they can work on a deal, which I'm just saying, I have said this entire time, but I am not Elliot Friedman, so no one listen to me. But look,
their mistake, first of all, Emma, their mistake.
Yes. So, yeah, I think that both of those things, are interesting. And again, you mentioned it earlier, the Predators can sign Saros to an extension as early as July 1st, but it doesn't mean they have to.
Sure don't.
And Barry Trotz even said at his end of season media availability, it probably won't happen that quickly because again, especially now that we have this development about Igor Shesterkin and his contract, he also is not, he's still got a year left on his contract, just like Juuse Saros does. And so who knows? I mean, I would imagine if I'm the New York Rangers that I would want to lock him up pretty quickly, especially after his performance in the playoffs this year. My goodness. And so I would imagine we're not going to be waiting too long for a new contract for Shesterkin with the Rangers. But now if that is, a big deciding factor for Saros's camp, then, it'll depend on when that happens. But, assuming that happens sometime this summer and that it doesn't, like, negotiations don't drag into next season, then, that could determine when we hear anything on a Saros contract extension. But like, barring some sort of apocalyptic development, I think it's safe to say Juuse Saros is staying in Nashville. He wants to, the Predators want him to. And so everyone just simmer down with all the trade talk.
Yes. That, and the other thing that I would throw out, and this is probably something that we could debate on an entire podcast at some point, the idea that it's one or the other. You either commit to Juuse Saros or Yaroslav Askarov, I think, is an absolute false narrative. You can have both, and having both is best for the Nashville Predators, unless and until Yaroslav Askarov shows some weird way that he isn't an NHL goaltender, which I just simply think that's not true. He is an NHL quality goaltender. I think he needs more time. But the idea that it is one or the other, you're going to go all in on one or the other, you don't have to. Best case scenario, and quite frankly, best and wisest long-term scenario is you keep both. And so that's a narrative that I think everybody just needs to exhale on it. You don't have to get rid of one. Yes, they are probably your two most valuable trade pieces. You don't have to trade either one of them. Just because something has value doesn't mean you trade it.
That's, again, like my mom says, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Listen to Emma's mom, y'all. Barry Trotz, call Emma's mom.
I think
doesn't mean you should.
I think that, like, I always, as you were saying that, I think of the old El Paso, the taco commercials where they're trying to decide if they want hard shell or soft shell. And then the little girl just goes, ¿Por qué no las dos? Like, why not both? And I'm like, I feel like that's the situation that we're in.
I 100%. I don't know how to say that in Spanish. But exactly what Emma said.
Finally, y'all, my Spanish translation degree has come in clutch as a hockey writer. Wow.
That's right.
Mark your calendars.
Say it again for us.
¿Por qué no las dos? Finally.
You heard it here first. God. Elliot Friedman isn't giving you that breaking news.
That's right. That's right.
In Spanish. That's right.
Now, a whole other episode could be who Askarov and Saros, who's the hard shell, who's the soft shell. I think we could probably debate that too. But
look, it's an off season. We may dig into that content, you all.
We may get to that, but once we hit like August here, we may be
talking hard and soft tacos.
We might be scraping the bottom of the barrel with that.
That's right. I do think, just my quick answer, Saros is the hard shell because he double cups.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Yeah. Although we've never asked Yaroslav Askarov, and quite frankly, friends, I will not be the first reporter to do that. So
yeah, Alex, you're up. You're up, buddy. We need you to ask that.
That's right. Keep your eye on Alex Doherty, everyone. He's gonna be breaking that future Yaroslav Askarov news. In the meantime, though, Emma, let everybody know, where can they find you on social media and where can they find your non-double cup work?
You can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen. I promise I tweet in English, so you don't need to hear any more Spanish from me. And you can find my work, which does not cover the double cup subject, at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at penaltyboxradio.com. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.